Hello, my name is Garchompro, and I've been Challenger since Set 2, and I'm currently top 5 NA. So I've been playing in a lot of high elo PvE and houses during Set 8.5 PvE, and I feel like I have a strong grasp on how to play all the different comps in Set 8.5, and I'm here today to share that knowledge with you. During this video, I'll be going over all the different comps that I think are good, starting with 4 costs and working our way to 1 cost carries throughout the video. If all you're interested in is seeing the comps themselves, feel free to go to the description and click on the link to this presentation. You can go and look at the comps, although they will be in less detail than I will explain during this video. In addition to that, if you're only interested in seeing a couple of the comps during this video, there should be chapters in the description. You can click through those and see just the parts on this comp, as I know the video will be long. In addition to that, I plan to make meta updates soon, so make sure to subscribe if you want to catch what meta updates happen and my tier list for current patches. The idea of this video here is to just give an idea of how to play to these comps, so this should hold for the entirety of Set 8.5, so I won't be covering a tier list right now. However, if you go to the presentation a day or two from when this is uploaded, I should have a tier list made, and I'll make a video over that as well. Before we begin, there's a couple things I want to make sure you know. If you're newer to TFT, make sure you familiarize yourself with these definitions. I'll be using them throughout the video, so make sure you understand them, as I'll assume you know what they mean. In addition, I'll try and call things by their proper name during this video. However, I may slip up and call things by their abbreviation, so make sure you read through these abbreviations if you don't know them, just in case I slip up. They should be mostly intuitive. And without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so for our first comp we have Warwick Brawlers. Now the idea of this comp is to play around Warwick as much as possible, so we're going to funnel him with 4 Brawler and 4 Admin. 4 Brawler will typically be our defensive trait, and 4 Admin will typically be our offensive trait, although sometimes it'll function as a defensive trait as well. In terms of units, I'm just playing 4 Brawler plus 4 Admin, and then we can fit in Shen nicely to give us Defender along with Riven and Hacker. Typically Warwick always wants to be Hackered. This is due to the fact that it will prevent him from getting stuck on frontline tanks, meaning you don't even have to run stuff like Last Whisper. And then it'll also give some potential to just one-shot enemy backlines, which will pretty much auto-win you the fight a lot of the time. Whenever you're playing this comp, if you're bleeding out HP, you can roll down at level 7 for Warwick 1 and hit this board here. This board is nice and cheap to hit. Everything's 2 and 3 cost except the Warwick, so you should be able to stabilize quite easily off of Warwick 1. Otherwise, you can just go level 8 and roll for Warwick 2 if you're in a good position. In terms of admins for this comp, the best admins are going to be attack damage admins, although attack speed and HP scaling admins are quite good as well. In terms of items here, we really want Quicksilver for Warwick. I think Quicksilver is Warwick's most important item. This is due to the fact that he's a drain tank, so if he is CC'd, he's not going to be damaging, and if he's not damaging, he's not going to be healing, which will make him less tanky. So Quicksilver not only gives him some bonus attack speed and damage due to the fact that he's not CC'd, but it also makes him tankier as a result. I think Titans is his next best item. He attacks very fast, so Titans is really strong due to the fact that it'll stack quickly. He wants to face tank a lot of stuff, so the added resistances from Titans is very strong, and then also gives him bonus damage. For the third item, we can go a variety of things. I think Giant Slayer is good, I think Infinity Edge is good, Deathblade is good, Rudon's Hurricane is good, and even Last Whisper can be decent as well. Also, Second Titans is very good as well in that slot. In terms of variations for this comp here, once you go level 8, we can slot in Echo for Aegis if we're just running this version right here. If we have Jax items, we can put in Jax over Vi and potentially, let's say, put like an RFC Rageblade on him. This is going to be relatively rare though, as typically you'll be putting your bow items on your Warwick instead of your Jax, so the likelihood you have that is relatively low. You could realistically put anything in at level 8 though. You could put in Aurelion Soul for anti-heal, you could just put in like Fiddlesticks or Urgot for support / CC. Isn't super important what you put there. If you have Brawler +1 though at level 8, you should always be playing 6 Brawler. If you have Admin +1, you should drop Camille and play 6 Brawler in that case. But if you have Admin +2, you should pretty much always be playing 6 Admin. One important thing to note is that if you specifically have the on ally death AD Admin, what you want to do is you want to drop Vi, you want to drop Riven, and you want to move all these units back. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to play 3 mechs. So we're going to pop in Garen, we're going to pop in Jax, and we're going to pop in a random mech here, let's say Leona, and we'll mecha the Garen. What this means is that when the Jax and Leona get eaten by the Garen at the beginning of the fight, they count as an ally death, which will proc the on-death AD admin, giving our Warwick a bunch of free AD at the start of the fight, and then he'll also subsequently get more AD as your units die. So this is very powerful. If you're playing on ally death AD, you should always go with this variation. Any ally death variation may want this, but specifically the AD variation is very worth going for. This is probably the strongest variation of Warwick anyways, as it is just very strong. In terms of items for this comp, outside of Warwick items, you can theoretically throw AP items on LeBlanc. Stuff like Archangels is very good in this comp due to the fact that you're very tanky, so random AP items can go on the block. This is very good if you have, let's say, an HP scaling admin as well. The Archangels will scale. Attack speed admins LeBlanc will also benefit from, so you can throw AP items on her in that case. If you have tank items, traditionally you're going to want to put them on Riven. This is due to the fact that she's going to get 4 Brawler plus Defender. Redemption is going to be very good, Sunfire is going to be very good, and then random tank items like, Warmogs or Bramble or Dragon's Claw will be great on her as well. In terms of augments for this comp, Admin +1 and Brawler +1 are both very good. Knife's Edge is very good. Of course, if you have Knife's Edge, just move your Warwick up into the first 2 rows. Makeshift Armor is very good with Brawlers due to the fact that they have naturally high health pools, so it's going to give you a lot of free value. Second Wind is also very good with Brawlers due to the fact that they'll pretty much all live to 10 seconds, so you'll get the proc and it'll give you a lot of value. In terms of hero augments for this comp, if you're given 2-cost hero augment, Hextech Retribution is going to be good, Boxing Lessons will be good, and then you can also drop Vi for Lee Sin if you get Invigorate as an option. For 3-cost hero augment, you probably drop Vi for Jax, and you can run Jax's support augment, which should give attack speed and armor to your entire team. And then if you have 4-cost hero augment, you want to go for either of Warwick's augments. I think his support augment, which I believe is Big Data, is a bit better than his carry augment, which is well fed, but honestly both of them are acceptable. You typically don't want to be going for a 5-cost augment in this comp, so if you're given 4 for 5, try and just go for Warwick augment. Alright, so next we have Warwick Lasercorp. The idea of this comp is to play around laser cores. You want to be playing around vertical laser cores. So this means that typically you want to be playing this comp if you have a laser core +1. This is due to the fact that laser core spikes really hard on 5 laser core, which you would naturally need Mordekaiser to hit, but if you have the laser core +1, you can hit 5 laser core really easily at level 7 without Mordekaiser. When you play this comp, you're going to want to roll down usually at 4-1 to hit Warwick if you need to stabilize, otherwise you can go 8 and roll for Warwick 2 plus Mordekaiser at that point. In terms of the units we're playing here, we're running Warwick, Yasuo, Ashe, and Renekton for the laser cores, and then Mordekaiser if we hit it for 5 laser core. Warwick always wants to be hacker typically, so Shen and LeBlanc are going to be ideal for Warwick. The thing with Warwick is he just really wants to be hackered. It means that he doesn't have to run stuff like Last Whisper to kill the front line, and allows him to potentially just one-shot carries. So Warwick in general just loves hacker, so we slot in Shen plus LeBlanc here for that. In addition, and then I have this Garen here as the last slot. Realistically, this Garen could be anything in this spot. You could just run any random legendary, or like an Aatrox if you hit an Aatrox 2 instead. I just threw in Garen because it gives Defender, but the spot is not fixed. You could, Aatrox would also be a great substitute instead. In terms of items for this comp here, we're going to be going for the best Warwick items, which is going to be Quicksilver, Titans +1, which would be Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge, Deathblade, Runons, or Last Whisper for the last slot. Then you typically want to be prioritizing frontline items, so just any generic frontline items. Spark and Shiv are very good in this comp as well due to the fact that the laser core drones do magic damage, so definitely prioritize those if possible, but if not, it's fine as well. In terms of augments for this comp here, Laser Core +1 is going to be very good. It's going to allow you to stabilize much easier. Spirit of the Exile is fantastic. The laser core drones will scale really well off of attack speed, so being able to give your whole team a free 22% attack speed is very good. Exiles is very good in this comp. Your frontline has a lot of units on it, right? We have Shen, Garen, Mordekaiser, Renekton, Yasuo, but none of them are super beefy, so Exiles gives us a lot of value in that case. Knife's Edge again is fantastic for Warwick, just throw him in the front 2 rows. Throw the Hunt's good to keep Warwick alive a bit longer too, which is really nice. In terms of hero augments, Spirit of the Exile is going to be your best case at a 2-cost hero augment. In terms of a 3-cost hero augment, you can simply just go for Shen support. In terms of 4-cost hero augment, of course, you can go for either Warwick augment, and then at 5-cost hero augment, you can go for either Mordekaiser augment due to the fact that it'll give you a free Mordekaiser. Alright, so next we have Jhin Renegade Flex. Of all the new comps introduced, this one is probably my favorite. It's a lot of fun, it's really flexible. The idea of this comp is we really just play around Jhin. So the core of this comp is just going to be Jhin, Vex, Pyke for the 3 Whiff Rocker, plus another Renegade to activate 3 Renegade. Typically that will be Viego. Honestly, all you need in the comp is those 4 units. The other 4 slots are completely open. In this spot here, I'm just running Leona Camille for 5 Renegade, and then I'm running Alistar, which will give us Oxforce for Viego, in addition to Mascot, which is nice, but that's not that important. And then Echo here fills out 3 Aegis and gives us some nice tank items to run, but realistically, those units aren't what we need to run. You can drop the Al, you can drop the Leona, you can drop the Echo, you drop the Camille, and play whatever you want in those slots. So you could theoretically just play good units. For instance, maybe we hit Aatrox 2, so we could put tank items on Aatrox 2 instead, and then maybe we just run like random legendaries like Fiddlesticks and Urgot, and then maybe we just ran a random another good unit like Around Soul. Generically, good units are typically going to be Alistar, Morgana, Rammus, Shen, Aatrox, Asol, Belveth, Echo, sometimes Garen, Jhin, Viego, Fiddlesticks, Janna, Leona, or God as well. Those units can all be just ran as generic good units, so a version like this would also be acceptable as well. Of course, if you have Renegade +1, what we can opt to do is go for 7 Renegade. The problem with going for 7 Renegade if you have the Renegade +1 is, of course, due to the fact that you're forced to run a Sylas. So you'll typically just drop this Echo here, you'll run Alistar, and you will run, where is he, Sylas. So if you have Renegade +1, of course, you could play this variation. Sometimes you may opt to not do this, though, with Renegade +1, and you'll simply just drop down like this, and then just play, you know, 2 generic good units right here instead. If you have Renegade +2, though, you should probably always try and play 7 Renegade is really strong, unless you just hit a lot of really good units and just want to play 5 Renegade, always just Jhin Viego. One variation you can do here is you can actually run LeBlanc here. This is really good if you have a strong admin, due to the fact that you have Hacker and admin here, and then you can Hacker the Viego, which is really powerful. The biggest disadvantage of this, of course, is the fact that you're going to have a lackluster frontline, so make sure to keep that in mind. Of course, you can really do whatever you want with this comp. For instance, if there's a lot of AD in the lobby, we can opt to go for Shen Garen here for some defender frontline. Is really not that important. Just make sure it makes sense based off your game state. In terms of items for this comp, the most important things are going to be Jhin items. Jhin is typically going to want Last Whisper, plus some strong damage item, typically either Deathblade and IE, plus a third AD item. So that could be like Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Infinity Edge, Rudon's Hurricane, Hand of Justice, Guardbreaker as your last slot. Then in terms of other items, we want to either go for frontline items or Viego items. In my opinion, best Viego items are going to be Gunblade, Titans, and then like Deathcap or Jewel Gauntlet or Spark for the last item, although Hand of Justice is also good over Gunblade as well. Echo items will just be traditional tank items, stuff like Sunfire, stuff like Stoneplate, stuff like Warmogs, and that type of item are going to be very good for Echo. If you hit Pike 3, you can potentially itemize Pike. If you're going for Pike 3, you typically want to go Shojin, and then I believe Archangels is also very good on him, but you typically just want to go Shojin plus 2 damage items on him, and you want to make sure he's hackered. So if you're going Pike 3, maybe you want to run the Blanc, and then sometimes you may just opt to drop out of this Leona here, and actually Riftwalker the Pike for free 3 hacker in this position. This is one variation you can do if you have Pike 3. I would probably only do this with Pike 3. One other important note to make is that let's say we are naturally running 3 Renegade anyways, you should pretty much always be throwing Zac for extra hacker, as going +1 hacker is going to be better than going +1 Renegade if you're 3 Renegade. Sometimes you might just be running Leona naturally anyways for, you know, 3 Aegis, 3 Renegade, so we may as well just like hacker for the bonus hacker in this position. In terms of augments for this comp, Riftwalker +1 is good, you can just drop Vex, it's a free +1. Renegade +1 is good, as we said with Renegade +1, you can opt to either just drop Camille for 5 Renegade, or you can opt to run Sylas for 7 Renegade. Renegade +2, of course, will let you just play 7 Renegade nicely. Makeshift Armor is good, because Zac will benefit from the Makeshift Armor. In addition to that, Exiles is good if you're going to be positioning Exiles. If you're positioning Exiles, you typically want to do it something like this. Yes. You'll position Exiles something like this. And then Jeweled Lotus is also good, as you have 2 damage dealers in Jhin and Viego, so both of them will benefit really highly from Jeweled Lotus. Other generic, combat augments like Throw the Hunt and Celestial Blessing are great as well. In terms of hero augments in this comp, Pike Support augment should be solid. Hextech Retribution should be solid if you're opting to run Camille in this comp. You'll get a bonus proc of it off of the Zac, I believe. And then in addition to this, the Jhin augments should both be good as well. You get a free Jhin. Viego augments should be good if you have Viego items. If you can get Alistar's carry augment, you want to move the items over to Alistar, as Alistar 2 with his carry augment is very, very powerful. And then for 5-cost hero augments, you typically want to go for Eclipse Prime. It's a free Leona and then free damage reduction for your entire team, which is really strong. Alright, so next we have 6 Spellslingers. Now the idea of this comp is to play around Neeko and or Twisted Fate carry with 6 Spellslingers to maximize their damage. When you're playing this comp, you typically want to go fast 8, although you can roll at level 7 for TF1 and Neeko 1 if you need to stabilize. So in terms of units here, we're simply just running 6 Spellslingers with Annie as our frontline. Fiora is giving us a Duelist and Oxforce. This Fiddlesticks here is not important. You can throw anything in this slot. A lot of times you may opt to go Echo. Sometimes you'll just not play the Fiddlesticks and play Echo instead. And then if you're running Echo, you may just run Alistar for Aegis if you want to in the lobby. Obviously you're losing Duelist on Twisted Fate, but sometimes that's not the biggest deal. In terms of items for this comp, Neeko typically wants to be running Shojin +2 if you're only playing 2-star Guardian. If you're playing 4-star Guardian or higher, Neeko typically doesn't want Shojin. You don't want mana generation on a 4-star Guardian Neeko. But if you're running 2 Star Guardian, a lot of times Shojin is going to be best in slot. Jewel Gauntlet will typically be best in slot as well. And the third item can be a variety of things. We're going to have Guardbreaker, Giant, Slayer, Hand of Justice, Gunblade. Deathcap is also fine as well. In terms of Twisted Fate items, he's going to be the best Shiv holder in this comp. Obviously, if you're going Ionic Spark, you don't want to go Shiv as well. Rageblade is great on him, Jewel Gauntlet is good on him, and then generic AP items are going to be good on him as well. Deathcap is good, Giant Slayer is good, Guardbreaker is good. Anti items is going to typically take your frontline items, so Sunfire is going to be really good to help secure kills onto the frontline, as you might not have as much burst as like an AD comp. Spark is going to be very good on her as well, and then you can just do any traditional tank items like, let's say, a Stone Plate. If you have Spellslinger Crest, you typically want to put the Spellslinger Crest on your Echo, right here. If you're doing that, you'll move the items from the Annie over to the Echo, due to the fact that he'll be a lot tankier with the Spellslinger Crest. In terms of variations of this comp, there's going to be a lot of variations. For one right here, I have a 4 Oxforce variation where we just run Twisted Fate, Neeko, Annie, Janna, and then 4 Oxforce with Echo. This is a good variation, gives you a lot of frontline, so if you feel like you need a bit more frontline, this variation is good. This variation allows us to play really hard into Neeko carry, so if we don't have Twisted Fate items, you may opt to go for Spellslinger instead. This is due to the fact that getting 4 Spellslinger is going to be very big for Neeko, but obviously leaves TF in the dust a little bit. And this slots in very nicely with Nyla, Echo, Neeko, Syndra. And if you can manage to get Syndra, of course, Shojin is going to be your best item. She's going to permanently throw stuff and give you a ton of frontline. In addition, of course, these variations may be due to the fact that you have a +1 in 3 different traits, being Spellslinger, Oxforce, and Star Guardian. If you have Oxforce +1, what you may opt to do is simply just naturally run in this 3 Oxforce units +1 on your Oxforce, so Fiora here. So with Oxforce +1, you have 4 Oxforce in this case. If you have Star Guardian +1, of course, you may just simply opt to run Echo here, and now you have 3 Star Guardian. What you may also opt to do is drop 2 of these units right here, and instead run Syndra plus Nyla. Nyla's good because she also gives Duelist to the Twisted Fate, and now you have 6 Star Guardian, assuming you have Star Guardian +1. And of course, if you have Spellslinger +1, what you can simply do is just play the 5 Spellslingers we had earlier, plus Nyla for a nice 4 Star Guardian, 6 Spellslinger. I really love this variation. If you have Spellslinger +1, this is definitely my favorite. I think this just fits super nicely and is really strong. So definitely with Spellslinger +1, this is what you want to be going. Of course, if you have Spellslinger +1, you could theoretically go 8 Spellslinger, although I don't usually think it's worth it. If you have Spellslinger +2, though, you should probably opt for 8 Spellslinger. And then if you have Star Guardian +2, of course, you should be able to easily fit in 6 Star Guardian as well if you just simply go for a Syndra here. In terms of augments for this comp, Spellslinger +1 as well as Star Guardian and Oxforce +1 are going to be very good. Jewel Lotus is fantastic, allows you to forego the Jewel Gauntlet on your Neeko and Twisted Fate, and makes all your backliners do a lot of damage. Portable Forge is great if you can get Monozane. Monozane is fantastic for Neeko. It's going to buff her damage a lot because she'll just permacast at the start of the fight. Cybernetic Uplink is great to make your units cast a lot more. So in terms of hero augments, I would go for either of the Annie augments if you have 2-cost augment. If you have 3-cost augment and you don't already have MR Shred, you can go for the Alistar support augment. It's going to be very good. At 4-cost augments, you can take either the Neeko augments or the Twisted Fate support augment. I don't think the TF carry augment's very good because you're not going to be playing Vertical Duelist in this comp, so he's not going to be generating that much money. In terms of 5-cost hero augments, currently Category 5 is insanely good. Empowered Reserves, which is Syndra support augment, should also be very good. And sometimes the Janna carry augment, the Janna support augment will also be very good. Yeah, if you have Category 5, you definitely want to be moving Neeko items over to Janna, though. She will do a lot of damage. At 4-cost, you can theoretically also go for the Echo support augment, although I think typically you're going to want to greet either the Neeko or Twisted Fate augment for the free +1. Also, just a note, at 1-cost, Lucent Barrier is very good, which is Lux's support augment. So feel free to take Lucent Barrier at 1-cost and play this comp, as that augment is very strong. It's a bunch of free AP for 2 of your units. Alright, so next we have 6 Duelist Twisted Fate carry. Now the core of this composition is really just going to be 6 Duelist plus Annie, which means the comp actually fits quite well at level 7. What this means is your comp is going to be able to roll at level 7 to stabilize off of 6 Duelist, and then go 8. Typically what you want to do is roll at level 7 until you hit 6 Duelist, and then go 8 immediately after, fitting in Annie at level 7 because he gives you Spellslinger and Oxforce. This variation of the comp runs Twisted Fate as carry. Now, the most important item prioritization for this composition is going to be lockets. You typically want to put lockets on your Nyla, and then you want to go for Twisted Fate items. Twisted Fate really likes AP items in this composition, so you're going to be looking at Shiv, Deathcap, GS. There's some other options that are strong as well. Guardbreaker, Jewel Gauntlet, Gunblade, Hand of Justice. If you have spare AD items, feel free to put them on Vayne. Stuff like Last Whisper, Runeon's Infinity Edge will go on Vayne. Later on, we'll talk more about the Vayne carry variation of Duelist, so this one would be more so additional items on her. If you have pure tank items, stuff like Warmogs, Bramble Vest, Dragon's Claw, typically put that stuff on Fiora. If you don't have a Duelist +1 or an Oxforce +1 or none of that, you can just put in a random unit at level 8. Again, I had Fiddlesticks on the comp list, as it's just a good generic unit, but you could theoretically just throw in any decent unit. You could even just throw in another random Duelist, like another Fiora 2 would also be acceptable here. Obviously, if you have Duelist +1, you typically want to put your Duelist spot on Annie, and then just throw in Kayle for 8 Duelist. If you have Oxforce +1, I typically Oxforce my Nyla, and then you throw in Alistar for 4 Oxforce. Both of those are very, very powerful. In terms of items, Knife's Edge is very, very good early game. Of course, Duelist and Oxforce +1 are very good as well. Makeshift Armor is quite good because all your units become relatively tanky, because you typically want to have 2 to 3 lockets in this comp. Celestial Blessing, Thrill the Hunt are very good, because a lot of times you don't want to commit an item slot to healing, because your comps are so fights are so fast, you typically just want to run triple damage on your carry. So healing augments are quite good as well. Jeweled Lotus is also good. A lot of your units just do a lot of damage, so Jeweled Lotus gives you a lot of value. In terms of item starts for this comp, I really like to start Locket Component. Chain is my favorite. Rod is also good. And then if you don't get Chain or Rod, Sword and Bow are also acceptable. But I think either Rod or Chain is the best for this comp in terms of item starts. What I like to do when I play Duelist is I like to roll at 6 to stabilize. I typically run like a 4 Duelist plus Oxforce board. So something like this, maybe we like get rid of the Yasuo and play some random unit here. Doesn't matter what it is. It could just be like another Duelist. Again, if I have the Duelist +1, you could easily fit in 6 Duelist at level 6. Then I roll at level 7 a little if I need to. I typically try and get Nyla 2, Vayne 2 at 4-1. And then I like to go 8 after that. Get in that Twisted Fate. Again, at 4-1, I like to roll for 6 Duelist. At level 8, you can go for 8 Duelist if you have Duelist +1. 8 Duelist is very, very powerful. It gives you that 20% damage reduction, which is very, very good. Otherwise, yeah, you can just play the comp that was shown. That's pretty much it for this comp. One thing you do want to keep in mind with this comp is you want to save a lot of HP early, as the comp is very, very strong in the mid game. That's its biggest strength. So make sure you save HP in the mid game. Oh, Battle Mage is also a decent augment as well. You can consider putting your Twisted Fate up here with Battle Mage. If you have Knife's Edge, you can consider putting your Vayne up here. Yeah, typically I just like to throw my units in the locket like this with the Oxforce units on the outsides. That way they take aggro first and proc the Oxforce. In addition, I actually think that going level 9 is almost always incorrect with this comp. If you make it to 8 with excess gold, what you should be doing is rolling for 3 stars, typically going to be Vayne 3, Nyla 3. If you get it Fiora 3, that's also not bad. And then of course Twisted Fate 3 is amazing, although that's very hard to hit with how contested he is especially. But yeah, typically hitting like Nyla 3 is actually going to be more valuable than going 9 and getting in a random legendary, which is good to keep in mind. In terms of hero augments for this comp, you typically want to go for the Fiora support augment at 2 cost. At 3 cost, you'll typically want to either go for Nyla support or Vayne support. And at 4 cost, you'll typically want to go for Twisted Fate carry. This is due to the fact that I think the Twisted Fate support augment giving attack speed to your team isn't that much value when you're running a bunch of duelists, whereas he's going to generate a lot of gold if you go with the Twisted Fate carry augment. So next we have 4 Ace. Now this comp is relatively unchanged from last set. It plays pretty similar. This is what I would consider a pretty high roll comp. The comp is very, very expensive in cost. Urgot and Fiddle aren't necessary, but the core of the comp is going to be Samira, Misfortune, Mordekaiser, Garen, Draven, Wukong. The idea here is we fit in the 4 Ace and the 3 Mech. Typically just with the 4 Ace, the Mech is the strongest frontline you could slot in because it allows you to get rid of the Draven effectively instead of having a dead slot. Again, I would only really play this composition from ahead or if I'm in a strong spot. This composition can easily win games, but you really need to be rolling on either level 8 or level 9 for it. If you're rolling at level 7, you should definitely play something else. In terms of items, what's important is that you have 3 tank items for your Garen. Redemption, Dragon Claw, Bramble Vest, Stone Plate, Protector's Vow are all solid options. You just want your Garen to be as tanky as possible because with the 4 Ace, you're going to typically have enough damage. And then you want to itemize either Misfortune and or Samira. I think Misfortune is slightly better, but Samira is also acceptable in this comp as well. Misfortune Vest and Slot is going to be Shojin +2. The +2 could be, Death Cap, Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker, Jewel Gauntlet, Hand of Justice, Gunblade, Static Shiv, a bunch of options there. I typically wouldn't run something like Archangels because the fights are too quick. And then Samira, Best in Slot, of course, is going to be Last Whisper +2, so that could be like Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge, Deathblade, Gunblade, Runaan's Hurricane. Although Runaan's Hurricane is weird because it doesn't proc Ace. In terms of variations for this composition, of course, you could just replace the Urgot Fiddlesticks with anything you want. If you want Aegis, maybe you could run Echo plus Alistar. And then you could maybe even, well, you're probably not dropping the Wukong for Leona, but you could run Leona and just have 4 mech in here, which is completely fine. Although I guess if there's no like AD carries in the lobby, you could drop Wukong for Leona. If you have Ace +1, what you ideally would do is drop the Draven for Leona in that case, and then you probably want to like slot in Aegis with that, which is pretty easy to do. Again, this is assuming you have the Ace +1. In addition, you aren't forced to run the mech. You can simply just run 4 Ace without the mech. In this case, you probably want to run like something like Echo or Aatrox as your frontliner. And then, yeah, you could just run like Echo, Aatrox, Mordekaiser, Fiddle, maybe like Alistar. You could replace this Fiddle with something. Something like this could also theoretically work. This variation I actually think is pretty good if you, again, have the Ace +1, as you can drop the Draven for something better in the slot and play like all high quality units, which is really good. Honestly, Ace +1 isn't as good as you'd think, especially if you're playing the mech variation, because like the Draven fits naturally and you want to be running Mordekaiser, Misfortune, and Samira all at the same time anyways, so it ends up being a little awkward to work around, but it's not bad, it's just not like amazing. The one nice thing about it is this comp, with Ace +1 in this comp, is you obviously aren't forced to hit Mordekaiser, but because this comp is so high rolly anyways, if you're not hitting Mordekaiser, like just play a different version. Like just play a different MF version or a different Samira version based off which one you want to carry. And then of course if you hit Mordekaiser too, you can go for items on Mordekaiser. A lot of times they'll throw Thieves Gloves on him, but any AP items are also quite good on Mord as well. In terms of very good augments for this composition, Second Wind is very good. Usually your Garen will live to the Second Wind and gain a lot of value out of that. Again, Portable Forge is also very good. Anima, Visage, Death Defiance, and Eternal Winter are all just good on mech in general. So those are great in this composition. Healing augments are great. Samira, MF, a lot of times you just want to run triple damage because you want to kill stuff as fast as possible. So healing augments like Thrill of the Hunt and Celestial Blessing give you a lot of value. Dual Lotus again is very good. You have Samira, Misfortune, and Mordekaiser all doing a lot of damage. Even Garen does a solid amount of damage as well. So Dual Lotus buffing up all those units is very, very good. In addition, Econ augments are fantastic for this comp due to the fact that the comp is so expensive inherently. You're really going to need a lot of money. Because to play this comp, you really need Samira 2, Garen 2, and MF 2. If you don't have all 3 of those 2-star, the comp is going to be a lot weaker than it could be, which is relatively hard to hit. It's not the hardest, but it's pretty expensive in terms of comps. So you really want to have as much money as possible. So stuff like Rich Get Richer, stuff like Clear Mind, maybe even like Cluttered Mind, Windfall, High-End Shopping, Level Up are all going to be great for this comp as they allow you to get to this board more reliably, which this board does cap very high. This is also a great variation to play out of Underground, especially if you have AP items. I think if you're playing Underground and you have AP items, this is probably your best bet in terms of comps to play. As again, the comp scales very hard. You have, potentially 3 carries here in Mordekaiser, MF, and Samira. Plus you can itemize the Garen as well, so you want a lot of items from Underground. So playing off of Underground is also very, very good. Again, typically only play this comp from ahead or from a strong position. Otherwise you're going to bot for a lot because you just won't be able to afford the whole board. In terms of hero augments for this comp, you really don't want to be playing around low-cost hero augments. Of course, 1 cost you could go for Re-Energize. You could also theoretically at 3 cost go for the Jax support augment and run that here. And at 2 cost you could go for the Draven support augment, which would be Ruthless Blades. And then at 4 cost, you typically want to go for whether either your Misfortune carry augment or either of the Samira augments, whichever one you're trying to carry. And then at 5 cost, I think the Urgot support augment is very good for this comp as well. And then obviously either Mordekaiser augment is fine if you just want the free +1 Mordekaiser. Alright, so next we have Anima Squad Misfortune Carry. So the idea of this comp is to play 5 Anima Squad with Misfortune Carry. The one thing I'll say about this comp is I think this comp is only usually strong if you have Anima Squad +1. I think fitting in 5 Anima Squad without the 5 Anima Squad +1 is a little awkward. You can drop the Garen for an Anima Squad unit or the Acel for an Anima Squad unit. It's a little awkward. You could also theoretically just drop the Vayne and only play 3 Anima Squad, but I also don't love that variation as well. So you typically want to be playing this with an Anima Squad +1. Once you're like stacking some Anima Squads early games, you get some Anima Squad stacks. The comp becomes a lot better if you have Anima Squad stacks early game. The core of this composition is of course going to be Misfortune for MF carry, Riven as your tank. Jinx is great for Anima Squad along with Prankster. You'll typically run Echo with Prankster as well. Echo is one of the suitable candidates for Anima Squad spat as he scales well off of the AP and the HP. And then I typically will just run Vayne as my 5th unit. Again, if you don't have +1, you could theoretically run like Nasus over Garen here. I really like Aurelion Sol. He makes a great holder of chalices in this comp, and then he's really good with Misfortune because he'll soften up their team for her, so her ult's more likely to kill stuff. Ezreal's another great fit as he gives quick draw to MF, so she does more damage. In terms of items, you really want Shojin +2 on your Misfortune. Shojin, of course, is your most core component. +2 could be Jewel Gauntlet, Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Giant Slayer, Archangels is good, Deathcap is good. Rageblade and Shiv are also acceptable, and if you really need to, you could even run Infinity Edge. Riven's typically going to take your tank items. A lot of times you really want to run Spark in this comp. You either want to Shiv or Spark usually, so to guarantee your Misfortune does enough damage. But she'll take other tank items like Sunfire, Bramble, Declaw, etc. Again, Aurelion Sol typically eats your chalices. He will cast very early and soften things out for Misfortune. He scales well off the AP. And if you have spare attack damage items, Vayne is also quite good. Honestly, Vayne 2 with attack damage items in this comp is quite good. Her plus the Misfortune will do a lot of damage, and if you can manage to get Vayne 3, very strong as well. Riven 3 is also extremely powerful in this comp as well. You can theoretically drop this Garen here though. If you're more scared of AP players than AD players, you could drop the Garen for Vi to put in Aegis and Brawler. You can theoretically drop Ezreal and Aurelion Sol as well. Sometimes you may want to drop them for random legendaries like Fiddlesticks, maybe Urgot. Nunu's also solid here, maybe Leona for more Aegis. If you have 2 Anima Squad +1s, 7 Anima Squad is definitely worth it. So I would just drop a unit for the Nasus in that position and play with 2 Anima Squads to play 7 Anima Squads, because 7 Anima Squads is very good. The problem with playing 7 Anima Squad normally is you have to play Sylas and Nasus if you have the +1, which is usually not worth it, but just playing one of them is fine, because it gives your team a lot more power. In terms of augments, this comp is pretty augment dependent in my opinion. What you really want to do is make sure you're playing on a strong augment for this comp. So any Anima Squad +1 augment is going to be very good. Bunny Mercenary is going to be very good for this comp as well. It'll make your Misfortune do a lot. Reverberation's great for this comp. And I think Soul Eater is also quite good for this comp as well. So playing it off of one of those is completely fine. In addition, once you're playing this comp, there's a lot of augments that will help buff up your Misfortune. Axiom Mark is amazing for her as she'll get a lot of kills, and a lot of times she'll be able to double cast and just wipe an entire board. Jewel Lotus is great. Basically gives you a free Jewel Gauntlet, so don't run Jewel Gauntlet if you have that. Second Wind is solid as your comp is relatively tanky with the Anima Squad stacks, so you should be getting good Second Wind value. Prankster Crest is fantastic. I love playing this comp off Prankster Crest at 2-1. Prankster Crest is one of the most powerful augments in Stage 2, as aggro dropping during Stage 2 is extremely powerful. So it just feels great to play. You get free 3 Prankster basically because Jinx feels great to play, Echo feels great to play here, so you just get free 3 Prankster, which is some nice CC onto the enemy team. You can just Prankster a random frontliner, maybe the Riven if she doesn't have a 3rd item, or just maybe whatever other random frontliner you have, if you're not running Riven on the front line. Typically though, I would just go for Misfortune 2 and then go level 9. Again, if you have a lot of Rivens and Vaynes, you can go for those 3-star, but typically I just go level 9 and transition to some legendary units. You can transition to Fiddlesticks, you can play Urgot here, these units are great. You can think of potentially moving Anima Squad Spat to Fiddlesticks if you can, although a lot of times it's not worth the remake, but Fiddlesticks 2 with Anima Squad Spat is very good. One other notable augment that I forgot to mention is Fiddlesticks Support Augment. I believe it's Absolute Corruption, I could be wrong though. Basically what happens with that augment is he gives 30 AP to the nearest unit and then allows them to share souls. So what I'll do if I'm running that augment, let's assume I'm not running this Urgot, let's just say I'm running this Vi here, is I'll position something like this to guarantee that the Fiddlesticks gets value on this Martian. So we see the Fiddlesticks is going to be sharing with the Misfortune. And in this scenario, the MF is then going to be getting free AP for every time a unit dies. And so a lot of times your Misfortune can get a very powerful cast off at the end of a fight. Once a lot of your units have died, and just completely clear the board because you'll just have a free extra 200 HP from the Fiddlesticks Support Augment. So definitely try that out if you're playing this comp. The Fiddlesticks Support Augment is fantastic. I'd say it's definitely the best augment for this comp, but obviously committing to this comp, you're going to commit to the comp before 4-2 because you really want to be getting Anima Squad stacks early. In terms of good item holders for Misfortune, I mean, you typically will just run Jinx, so you typically want to hold a new Jinx to item hold for the MF. You can also item hold with Vayne. Shojin Vayne is actually very good. Obviously stuff like Deathcap Vayne isn't great, but if you're just running Shojin Gunblade in your mid game, Vayne is fine to item hold, but Jinx is also good if you're running those AP items, and then just, remake the Jinx and the Vayne. Of course, you could always run any other AP carry early game, like a LeBlanc, but typically you want it to be one of the Anima Squad units here because you want them to be getting the stacks for you come late game. In terms of hero augments for this comp, at 1 cost, the best you can get is definitely going to be the Nasus Support Augment, which would be Soul Eater. At 2 cost, the best is going to be the Jinx Support Augment, which is Everyone Goes Boom. At 3 cost, you can go for Reverberation, which is very good, the Riven Carry Augment. And then at 4 cost, you can go for either of the Misfortune augments. I think Bunny Mercenary is a bit better, although the one that gives you gold is good as well. And then at 5 cost, the Fiddlestick support augment is very good. As I talked about, it allows you to buff up your Misfortune and be really, really strong. Alright, so next we have Mech Samira. Now, the idea of this comp is somewhat similar to 4-Ace, except instead of playing around 4-Ace, we're going to be playing just around Samira. So the idea with this comp is we can be a bit tankier. If we don't have Misfortune items, we may as well just play around the Samira instead. The core of the comp here is really going to be Samira, Sure Shot +1, ideally Ultimate Ezreal, as well as Garen plus 2 other mechs to feed the Garen. In terms of items, you want tanky items for your Garen, so stuff like Redemption, Dragon's Claw, Bramble, Stoneplate, Protector's Vow, and then Titans and Bloodthirster are also very good on him as well. You want Last Whisper, plus damage items on Samira, so Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge, Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Deathblade, Runic Hurricane are also acceptable as well. And really only those 5 units are going to be your core units. You can really run whatever else. Here I just simply have Urgot, Fiddlesticks, Acel as their great flex units to fit into a comp. But again, you could simply just run Echo plus Leona plus Alistar for Aegis. You could run another Sure Shot, although I don't necessarily think it's worth it. You could run like a Bel'Veth. I wouldn't run Aatrox because you're going to be running tank items on the mech. Yeah, these are probably close to the units you want to be running. Theoretically, if you have a lot of attack damage in your lobby, you could just go for 4 Defender. So maybe drop like Aurelion Sol Urgot or Acel Fiddlesticks or something, and played 4 Defender. The idea for this comp is you really want to be rolling on level 8. Again, you really want to be hitting these legendaries. This is how the comp caps out. If you're not hitting the legendaries, you typically will struggle to top 4 unless you have a really, really high roll position. Ultimate Ezreal 2 is a great way to win out with this comp. If you hit Ez 2, you ideally want to have items on him instead of Samira. But typically I wouldn't sell my Samira to put items on the Ezreal. If you have spare AD items, can go on Urgot. Spare AP items can go on Fiddlesticks and Aurelion Sol. Thieves Gloves is amazing for Urgot. It's also solid for Fiddlesticks as well. So I love Thieves Gloves in a comp like this, as you can just Thieves Gloves your Urgot. In terms of augments, augments that are great for mech are very good, so Second Wind is very good. Portal Forge giving you either Death Defiance, Anima Visage, or Eternal Winter is fantastic for your mech. Healing augments are also great, allows you to forego a healing item on your Samira, which is really nice. Going triple damage actually is really big for her. And then, of course, you also want econ augments a lot of the time, as this comp is relatively expensive. You want to be capping on legendaries. Ideally, you want to be going level 9, throwing in extra legendaries, again, usually Fiddlesticks and Urgots. As this is how you'll typically cap out your board. All econ augments are quite good for this comp as well. Again, this is a strong comp to play from Underground. If you have like a Wukong 2 that you're sitting after an Underground cash out, this is a great option. If you have AD items, you just play Samira plus Mech. You hit the Garens. In addition, with positioning in the comp, I actually really like to put AD units on the same side. The reason for this is you'll proc the Last Whisper, and they'll all hit the same target, which allows you to just burst stuff down super, super quickly. A lot of times stuff won't even get the chance to ult if you have a Samira, an Ezreal, and Urgot all autoing the same thing. So that's something I really, really like to do, is put these units on the same side. If you want maximum Urgot value, you want to put him either in this hex or this hex. He'll hit the most hexes, or middle is also fine. But I would typically like putting him in either this hex or this hex if my Samira's here. And then, same on left side if my Samira's left side, just to focus fire units better. In terms of hero augments for this comp, if you have 1 cost, you could go re-energized for Wukong. There's no great 2 cost hero augment. Your best option might be the Sivir support augment or Boxing Lessons, which is the Vice support. At 3 cost here, we could go for the Jax support augment. And then at 4 cost, you want to go for either the Samira augments. And at 5 cost, you want to go for either the Ezreal augments. Alright, so next we have Samira Flex. Now this comp plays pretty similar to the Samira Flex of last set. You typically want to be rolling at level 8, level 9. One advantage of this comp is it's one of the highest capping comps of the game. Due to the fact there's really no core to this comp. The only core unit in this comp is Samira. The rest is basically at your discretion. What this means is you can play a lot of legendary in this comp and cap really, really highly. But it also means that you don't have a stable like level 7 board, level 6 board. So you need to be playing from a strong position. You need lots of money. You need to be going 8. Again, playing off of something like Underground is very, very good for this comp. So in terms of core units here, we have Samira plus Frontline. Ultimate Ezreal is great as it gives you Sure Shot. Really, I don't like playing Ashe or Sivir with the Samira because I think the units are just not very good. I would honestly just play no Sure Shot over playing one of those, but Ultimate Ezreal is actually a good unit, so he's good to play. You want to be playing Frontline. I have the Aegis Frontline in here because it's just a consistent way to deal with AP players. I think Aatrox is going to be your ideal main tank. He's going to be taking your tank items. You could theoretically also run like a Rammus as your main tank as well. That's also acceptable. You could also theoretically run Echo as your main tank. That's another option. In terms of items for your Samira, you really want to be running Last Whisper plus 2. Infinity Edge, Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Gunblade, Runic Hurricane are all strong. You can put leftover AD items on either Ultimate Ezreal or Urgot. Again, if you hit Ultimate Ezreal 2, you can consider itemizing him before you itemize the Samira, but usually you'll hit the Samira before the Ultimate Ezreal 2. Thieves' Gloves are very good on Urgot just because he uses all of them really well. You could also think Thieves' Gloves your Ultimate Ezreal, that's fine. Or you could just put spare 80 items on Urgot. Putting tank items here on Aatrox, stuff like Warmog, Sunfire, Bramble Vest, that stuff. In terms of other units we can be playing in this composition here, Aurelion Sol is an option for this. We could definitely slot in Vi. If we want even more Aegis, right? Maybe you want 4 Aegis, Vi is a decent slot in here. You could slot in Shen plus Garen for Defender. If you want Defender in this comp, that is definitely an option. And you could throw in a random legendary as well. Like throwing in Janna's fine, especially if it's like Windy. Windy would be very valuable for Samira. And honestly, like Nunu and Willump is fine as well, especially if you're running Alistar, gives your whole team 2 mascot, and Nunu will do a decent amount of damage. Bel'Veth is also great. One variation of the comp that I do like is to run actually 4 attack damage carries, Samira, Ultimate, Ezreal, Bel'Veth, Urgot. You're just going to melt through stuff really quickly. A lot of times, though, I just cut to 3 and run 5 frontliners. But if you're not hitting the Urgot, the Ultimate Ezreal, you could run Bel'Veth. If you don't hit Samira, you could run Bel'Veth as well instead of Samira, especially in the meantime. Samira 2 is pretty much always going to be better than Bel'Veth 2. But if you don't have the Samira yet, Bel'Veth is very strong. Bel'Veth will pretty much always need healing, though, where Samira does not need healing, is one thing to keep in mind. So in terms of good units, that about covers it. You could theoretically run like Morgana in this comp as well, especially if you don't have Last Whisper. But Last Whisper on Samira is going to be way better than running Morgana, so it's kind of eh. In terms of augments, I think Exiles is by far the best augment for this comp. It's just so strong. It does so much. If you have Exiles, of course, just do your standard Exiles positioning, something like this. Should be good. As opposed to like an AP comp where your frontline is all coming from shields and the like, or heals. Your frontline here is really just coming off of the HP of your units. So Exiles is so much value here. Other fantastic augments, Jeweled Lotus is fantastic here, Celestial Blessing is fantastic, Thrill of the Hunt is solid as well, Makeshift Armor is great. Makeshift Armor is really good because it allows you to have all-in and going double AD carry, or even triple AD carry. You can go 3-item Samira, 3-item Ezreal, or like 3-item Samira, 3-item Bel'Veth. If you go Makeshift Armor, you don't have to worry about any tank items. Again, if I'm starting with tank items, I might opt to not take Makeshift Armor, but if I'm starting with offensive items, Makeshift Armor is extremely, extremely valuable. Second Wind is also quite good in this comp. You're decently tanky, you have a lot of frontline usually. So Second Wind gives you a lot of value. And then of course econ augments are very good. This comp really scales off of money. You want to be going level 9. If you can't either go level 9 or natural some 2-star legendaries or have like best augments possible, you will a lot of times just bot 4. Just hitting Samira 2 plus frontline is not enough to top 4 in this comp. You really need to be hitting those 2-star legendaries or whatnot. If you have like Celestial Blessing, Jeweled Lotus, and Exiles, you're probably fine, but that's like pretty high roll. Phony Frontline is also quite good in this comp as well. Just free Frontline is good for your Samira. But yeah, that's basically it for the comp. It plays very similar to the old Samira Flex comp of set 8, if you were familiar with that. In terms of hero augments for this comp, generally we don't want to be playing around low-cost hero augments. At 1 cost, there's probably nothing. At 2 cost, your best option is going to be Boxing Lessons Vi. You can also go Unrelenting Force Vi and run Tank Gunstone Vi in that position. Even at a Vi 2, Unrelenting Force Vi 2 is quite good. You could also go for the Sivir support augment and run a Sivir here. At 3 cost, you could go for the Alistar carry augment and put the tank items on him instead of Aatrox. At 4 cost, you typically want to go for either the Samira augments, and at 5 cost, you typically want to go for either the Ezreal augments. Sometimes you'll opt for one of the Urgot augments, but generally it's safer just to go for one of the Ezreal augments. You'd really only go for the Urgot augment if you already have an Ezreal, or you're high rolling really hard and want to just generate more money with like Shiny. Alright, so next we have Jax Reroll. Now, the idea of Jax Reroll is to play around Jax carry and play as many brawlers as possible for enough stall for Jax to kind of do his thing. In order to play this comp, you really want a rapid fire cannon on your Jax, ideally. Although you can theoretically get away with scope weapons as well. Scope weapons is also great for this comp. You don't need an RFC if you have scope weapons. You can theoretically play this comp without RFC. You could just run like Rageblade, Quicksilver +1, which is fine, but not as good as RFC. I would really only play on RFC. What you want to do when playing this comp is typically roll down to stabilize at level 6, as you stabilize off a 6 brawler at level 6 really easily. So just play 6 brawler at level 6, easy enough. And then you go 7, you definitely want to roll down for Jax to Riven 2 at level 7, stabilize there. And then from there you have the option of either slow rolling at 7 for Jax 3 Riven 3, or going 8. Oftentimes if you have a brawler crest, you may opt to go 8 and play 8 brawler. Otherwise, a lot of times people will stay 7. If you're at level 8, I think the optimal version of this comp without a brawler +1 is going to be playing the Mech So Leona Wukong ideally, but it could realistically be any mech units, or actually technically Garen over Wukong, but yeah. You could realistically be playing any mech units with 6 brawler 3 mech to buff up the Jax, because with no Soraka but Warwick existing, we can obviously naturally fit in admin. Of course, if you have brawler +1, you'll probably drop the mech and just play 8 brawler, and if you have admin +1, again, you can drop the mech and play 4 admin if your admin is good. Otherwise, attack speed for the entire team or AP for the entire team are good as well. Jax items, you really want RFC +2. Rageblade is also best in slot for sure, and healing is also fantastic. Gunblade and BT are great. Hodge is solid as well. There's some other items you can run on Jax. You can run Giant Slayer, Jewel Gauntlet, Death Cap, even like Shiv is fine. Titans is very good as well. You typically stack Riven with your tank items. Sunfire is great. Spark is really good as Jax does primarily magic damage, so Spark is fantastic. And Redemption is really good as it'll heal up all your brawlers and give them that AoE damage reduction. Spare 80 items can go on Warwick if you have those. In terms of augments for this comp, second wind is great as you'll typically get a lot of value with these tanky comps. Makeshift armor is great as you have so many high HP units. Battle Mage is great. You want to be front running your units anyways, gives them free armor and AP because you're running an AP carry in Jax. Jewel Lotus is just great for Jax in general. And then of course Brawler +1 is fantastic. There's plenty of other solid augments as well, like Celestial Blessing is great. Scope Weapons is also fantastic as it allows you to forego RFC on your Jax as long as you just put them in the back 2 rows. And that should be basically it for Jax. It's pretty much the same comp as it was in set 8. Not much has changed. Pretty easy comp to play. Just roll down, hit your Jax level 6, hit your Jax 2 at level 7, then either go 8 or stay at level 7 for Jax 3 run 3. In terms of hero augments for this comp, at 1 cost you could go for the Renekton support augment. At 2 cost you could go for the Vi and Lee Sin support augments. At 3 cost the Jax carry augments are very good. I don't think the Jax support augment is very good in this comp due to the fact that you don't want Jax to die, so you're losing a lot of value. And then at 4 cost, you can go for the Warwick support augment as well, which will give your team a bunch of bonus damage. This comp doesn't love any of the 5 cost hero augments. You could theoretically go for Eclipse Prime if you're going to mech for the Jax, and then feed the Eclipse Prime Leona to the Jax. But typically you want to go for either 3 or 4 cost hero augment with this comp. Alright, so next we have Vex Reroll. The idea of this comp is to play around Vex carry. Typically you're going to want a blue buff to play Vex carry. Maybe you have like the Vex carry augment or something like that. So the idea of the comp here is we run Vex, then we run Malphite, then we run Alistar, and we give the mascot to the Riftwalker, so we get 4 mascot for free, and then we just run Pike Jhin to fill out Riftwalker, and then Gangplank Lucian to fill out the supers, because we want to be 3-starring units. You can roll a little bit at level 6 to stabilize, but you generally want to go level 7 and slow roll at level 7 for Vex 3, Malphite 3, and then you can also hit Lucian 3, Pike 3. If you hit Pike 3, you can consider itemizing Pike as well, in addition to Vex. Your best Vex items are going to be blue buff, +2. So Gunblade's very good, Archangel's is very good, Death Cap's good, Jewel Gauntlet's good, Giant Slayer's good, Guardbreaker's good, Shiv is probably decent as well. Then you want to be putting your tank items on Malphite as he's going to be probably 3-starred later on and is going to have that 4 mascot to make him really tanky. Spark is fantastic for your Vex, and then just generic tank items are great, so Bramble, Dragon's Claw, Sunfire, Redemption, those items. Warmogs is great as well. You can consider going for Alistar 3, but he's usually so contested that you don't want to. But if you have the Alistar carry augment, maybe you consider it. Yeah, and if you have the Alistar carry augment, you actually may just move the items to Alistar off of Malphite anyways. Alistar 2 with the ally carry augments are very good. So if you have the ally carry augment, probably just move items from Malphite to Alistar. If you have spare attack damage items, you can put them on Jhin. And again, if you have Pike 3, you can consider itemizing him. Yeah, this is generally just going to be your comp at level 7. Once you go level 8, you can just play a random legendary unit, maybe like a Fiddlesticks or something. If you have mascot +1, you can consider dropping Gangplank at level 7 for 6 mascot. Otherwise, you may just want to keep supers in if you have 3-starred units. And then instead, opt to just play 6 mascot at level 8, which is completely fine. In terms of good augments here, mascot +1 is good, first aid kit's good, you have a lot of healing in this comp. The Vex carry augment is insanely powerful. I believe it's 22% healing for your whole team off the damage Vex does, which is really, really strong. Your team will like not die if you do that. Battle Mage is great. You can second row your Vex if you have that. Luden's Echo is great. Jeweled Lotus is great. Yeah, all that stuff is fantastic. In terms of hero augments for this comp, your best 2-cost option is going to be the Malphite support augment. It's going to be very good. You could also go for the Pike support augment as well, although I do think the Malphite support augment's a bit better. In terms of 3 costs, the Vex carry augment is very, very strong, so you should try and always grid for that. And then in terms of 4 cost, there's no great options, but you would probably just go for the Jhin support augment in that case. And in terms of 5 cost augments, you would just go for a Nunu augment and try and slot in Nunu into this comp. I think Nunu's support augment would be a bit better here as it'll buff up your Vex. Another interesting note is that 3-cost augment. The Alistar ones are also quite good. If you need MR Shred, the support augment's good, and if you get the carry augment, you could transfer items from Malphite to Alistar and run him with that. But the thing is, typically you're going to want to try and go for the Vex augment, so that usually won't happen. Alright, so next we have Heart Vex. And the idea of this comp is we can play this if we have a Heart Spat. Specifically a Heart Spat, I think if you just have Heart +1, well, if you have Heart +1, this comp obviously doesn't work because you need to be putting it on Vex. So you should be playing this comp on Heart Spat. You ideally want blue buff as well. So your best Vex items are going to be blue buff, Heart Spat +1. Could be like a damage item like Jewel Gauntlet, or healing, damage item like Jewel Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, etc. Or a damage, or a healing item like Gunblade, probably only Gunblade, maybe Hand of Justice as well. And the idea of the comp here is we simply just play 6 Heart, which will scale up our frontline. That's why we ideally want to be putting tank items on Echo, because he'll scale from the AP that Heart gives the entire team, which makes him very, very tanky. So we just simply run 6 Heart plus Echo, and then Ali fits in nicely because it gives us Ox Force and Aegis. And then the Heart scaling should also give your random backline units a good amount of damage, which should make the comp actually have a bit more damage than you'd expect. This is part of the reason why I think you should be fast 8ing instead of staying level 7 in this comp. Now, you should be rolling level 6, level 7 to stabilize. This comp stabilizes around lower cost units pretty well, stabilizes around Sona well, Vex well, of course. And you can, run stuff like LeBlanc for extra damage in the mid game or even late game if you want to keep her. You really want to go 8 to fit the entire comp. Just more frontline makes your backline do more damage anyways. So like, even though Vex 3 is fantastic here, you typically want to go 8 first. You can roll for Vex 3 at 8 though. If you hit Lee Sin 3, which sometimes happens, you can obviously put the Echo items on Lee Sin. If you have Cleansing Safeguard, you will put the Echo items on Lee Sin instead. Echo will typically just take your random tank items. Spark is going to be the best one you can get here. Stuff like Stoneplate, Warmog's Bramble, Dragon's Claw are also fantastic. Diego can take extra frontline-ish tank items. Stuff like Gunblade and Titans are great for him. So he can take more damage items. Or if you have mana generation, if it's like a blue buff, you can put it on Sona typically to get more heart procs. And if it's Shojin, Syndra would be ideal. Although she's a little hard to get to since sometimes you still just have to Shojin the Sona instead. Obviously before you hit Syndra, you can simply just run Pantheon before you hit Syndra. And that should be good. This comp's pretty similar to Heart Zoe from last set. Just roll a bit on level 6, roll a bit on level 7, stabilize, then go 8, play this board, and yeah, if you hit this, it should be a top 4 generally. Again, only play this on Heart Spat. In terms of augments, of course, Heart +1 is fantastic. First Aid Kit's great, you have a lot of shields in this comp between Echo and Lee Sin, and a decent amount of healing with like Alistar and Gunblade, and Sona's also a lot of healing as well. Syndra also produces shields, so First Aid Kit's very good. Cleansing Safeguard is fantastic. Luden's Echo's great, you have a lot of low mana units, especially like Vex, Lulu, Sona. So Luden's Echo is going to be doing a lot for you. Jewel Lotus is going to be doing a lot for you in this comp as well. I think Second Wind is also fantastic. Typically, it just buys a lot more time for your frontline, allowing you to scale up with that heart. Because if you can make it to overtime, your units are going to be doing so much damage in this comp. In terms of hero augments, at 1 cost, the Lulu support augment's very good. In terms of 2 cost, the Lee Sin carry augment Cleansing Safeguard is amazing. You're just going to put tank items on Lee Sin in that case. In terms of 3 cost, if you have no MR Shred, the Alistar version is good. The Alistar support augment is good. The Vex carry augment is also strong. And if you have items for Sona, potentially go for Sona 3, the Sona carry augment should be quite good as well. In terms of 4 cost, the Echo support augment is going to be very good. If you have a Dragon's Claw, you can even opt for the Echo carry augment. And the Viego support augment should also be good here. And at 5 cost, the Syndra support augment is going to be very good. Make sure you just fill up your entire bench, and it should give you a bunch of free AP for your entire team. Alright, so next we have 6 Duelist Vayne Reroll. The idea of this comp is you're playing Duelist and you have 80 items and a lot of Vaynes, and you want to stay level 7 and roll for Vayne 3. So at level 7, we'll just be playing 6 Duelist plus Ox Force here. If you have Duelist Heart, you can consider just running 8 Duelist at level 7. And honestly, if you have a Duelist Spat, a lot of times it'll probably be worth it just to go level 8 and then roll for Vayne 3, Nyla 3 then. In terms of items, Lockets are going to be your most important thing. You want to stack Lockets on your Nyla, and then you want to be stacking 80 items on your Vayne. Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, and Runons are my favorite. Deathblade is also great. Giant Slayer is also great. Yeah, those are my favorite ones on her. And she does a lot of damage. The thing about this is you stay level 7, you hit Nyla 3, Vayne 3, and you're just really strong. You can roll in 6 to stabilize a bit too, as well for this. This is typically something you flex between the level 8 and level 7 variant of Duelists. Of course, you can hit Vayne 3, Nyla 3 at level 8, but in this variant you want to stay level 7 to hit them a lot of the time. Again, the Lockets are more important than your Vayne items typically. You need enough frontline. She's going to scale up as long as she has semi-decent items. So make sure to prioritize Lockets first. In terms of strong augments, Duelist +1 is fantastic, allows you to play 8 Duelist.
Knife's Edge is great. Obviously, just put your Vayne second row in that case. Makes you really, really strong early game. Makeshift Armor is great. You have these random units locketed here. They're going to get a lot of tankiness if you have Makeshift Armor. Combat Training is actually one of the best options for this comp. If you have Combat Training, Vayne on 2-1, it's really, really, really strong. She'll be getting a lot of kills and do a lot of damage early game because of how strong this comp is in the early game. So you can stack up to a really, really high AD Vayne if you have Combat Training. It's very, very good. Throw the Hunt and Celestial Blessing are great. Typically, you don't want to be wasting a slot on healing and for Vayne. Gunblade and Hodge are fine on her. But yeah, you typically don't want to be wasting a healing slot, but sometimes you're forced to, especially sometimes you're forced to burn a tier on Hand of Justice, because tier is not the greatest in this comp, although tier can theoretically be made into redemption on Nyla. If you have spare AP items, you can put them on Twisted Fate. Spare tank items can go on Fiora. You can theoretically go Fiora 3, Yasuo 3 in this comp as well. Those are fine if you have them, maybe put more prioritization into itemizing them. Preparation is also very good in this comp as well. Just a lot of raw stats for your units is very, very good.
In terms of hero augments for this comp, at 2 cost, the Fiora support augment is going to be a good option. At 3 cost, Spread Shot for Vayne is definitely going to be your best option there. And then at 4 cost, I really like the Twisted Fate carry augment, as it's a bunch of free gold. Typically, this comp isn't going to have a strong 5 cost option. Of course, Get Paid as a 1 cost option is also very good and will generate you a lot of free money. You can run Gangplank the entire game.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for the comp. Just stay level 7, roll for your Vayne 3, Nyla 3, then go 8. And if you don't have a Duelist +1 at level 8, you could just play a random legendary, probably like a Fiddle, or again, just another random Duelist, like another Nyla 2 or Fiora 2 or whatnot. Alright, so next we have 5 Anima Squad Spread Shot. The idea of this board is you stay level 7 and reroll for Vayne 3, Ruin 3. You typically want to be playing this comp with the Spread Shot augment. You can technically play the comp without the Spread Shot augment, although it's a lot worse. Instead of Shojin, you just go Rageblade. So you really want to be running 5 Anima Squad here. So I have Vayne, MF, Jinx, Riven, Nasus, but you could theoretically drop one. And then I like to run Nyla for 2 duelists with the Vayne, and then Echo gives you Star Guardian and Prankster. So this is a good level 7 board with this comp. You can also simply just hit Vayne 2, Riven 2, then go 8 and play another unit here. The thing is, Vayne 2, Riven 2 with Spread Shot is honestly enough to top 4, so you can actually go 8. Typically what I'll do is go 7, roll on 7, then if I have a lot of Vaynes and Rivens, I'll stay 7 and slow roll for the 3 stars, and if I don't have a lot of them, I'll just go 8, play the 2 stars, and then maybe hit the 3 stars at 8 if I can. Because if you have the 3 stars, you're playing for a top 2 almost every time. Best in slot items here is going to be Shojin on Vayne. It's definitely her best item with Spread Shot. She's like kind of bugged in that her ult counts as an auto attack. So with Shojin, it's only 2 autos per ult, which literally doubles her damage output. Deathblade's her best damage item. Gunblade's also fantastic. Giant Star Guardbreaker are great as well. Infiniteam Edge is solid as well. You typically don't want to go stuff like Runon's Last Whisper here. Last Whisper is not great because you're doing true damage on the ult, and Runon's doesn't value from the ult as well. Riven items, you just want to go tank items. So Bramble, Dragon's Claw, stuff like that, Sunfire Cape, all that. Spare AP items can go on Misfortune. Honestly, if you can hit a Misfortune 2, she's great in this composition. If you hit an Anima Squad Spat, you can put that on Echo, and then you could drop the Nasus again for like a Vi here. Anima Squad +1 is great. Again, if you have a +2, you can go 7 Anima Squad. You could just play 7 Anima right here by Anima Squadding your Nyla and Echo. No need to go 8 with Anima Squad +2. Prankster Crest is fantastic. It gives you a lot of tempo early game. If you're taking it at 2-1, a lot of free frontline, you can just frontliner. It gives you some nice free CC, some nice aggro drop, really strong. Jeweled Lotus is great, good extra damage to your Vayne. Second Wind is great, a bunch of free frontline. Makeshift Armor is solid if you're not running Anima Squad Spats. Makeshift Armor is like not amazing here though, because if you have Anima Squad Spats, you lose a lot of value, but it can be solid. Yeah, just generic combat augments are also great. You really just, like, really all you need is Spread Shot in this comp, and you're good.
But if you can't get Spread Shot, you sometimes will play this with other augments. Reverberation is a decent substitute, will allow your Riven to carry really hard. If you want to play this comp from a lower cost hero augment, the Nasus support and Jinx supports are acceptable as well. And then if you're forced to take a 4-cost augment, you can always go for the Misfortune support augment for some free gold. And if you can manage to hit some Misfortune items, of course, Bunny Mercenary, her carry augment should be solid, but typically you're going to be prioritizing Vayne Riven items here, so that usually won't happen, and you'd usually rather just go for the Misfortune support augment. Alright, so next we have 5 Gadgeteen Gnar, and the idea of this comp is you want to be slow rolling on level 7 for Gnar 3 carry. Now the thing with this comp is you're going to spike and stabilize really hard off of Gnar 3 and 5 Gadgeteen. This is why I think you should only play this comp if you have Gadgeteen +1. This is due to the fact that if you don't have Gadgeteen +1, you're forced to hit Nunu in order to be strong with 5 Gadgeteen, which is going to be hard, especially because you're sitting most of the game at level 7 rolling for Gnar 3. You also really want to hit Gnar 3 in this comp, and so you need to stay level 7 to maximize the odds of hitting Gnar 3. The units we're running in this comp is of course going to be the 5 Gadgeteen, so we'll be running Gnar, Annie, Poppy, Nunu, assuming we have Gadgeteen +1. If you have a Gadgeteen Spat, it'll typically just go on Echo here. If you don't have Gadgeteen +1, you may be forced to run a Lulu here, but again, you shouldn't be playing without the Gadgeteen +1. Then we can run Echo for Prankster, then Alistar for Aegis and Mascot, and then Shen for Defender along with the Poppy. So those are the general units we're going to run here. Itemization-wise, Gnar really needs healing. BT is going to be the best Hodge, and Gunblade might be fine as well, but you really want Bloodthirster on him. His next best item is going to be Titans, for sure. And then third item could be a variety of things. Could go Last Whisper, could go Titans, could go Giant Slayer, could go Deathblade. You generally don't want to be running Infinity Edge on him though, due to the fact that his ult already is guaranteed to crit on the target he's ulting. So Infinity Edge is a lot of lost value. Typically you'd put tank items on Annie due to the fact that she's going to be 5 Gadgeteened, making her a lot tankier. And you can potentially go for Annie 3 in this comp in addition to the Gnar 3. If you have a Gadgeteen Spat, a lot of times though you'll put the items on Echo. Nunu here really just wants 3 items once you get to him. Usually you're going to prioritize itemizing your Gnar and your Annie, so what I like to do a lot of times is just take 1 item off a carousel later in the game, maybe like a Gunblade or some healing from a Nunu, and throw the 2 bonus Gadgeteen items you get on him, and just have that be 3 items, which is really, really strong for him. In terms of some variations, this is probably just the comp you want to play. At level 7, you're probably just playing Lulu over Nunu. If you have a bunch of AP items, what you consider is running LeBlanc. You could potentially just slot her in over either Echo, Alistar, or Shen, or if you're level 8, you could get this board right here. And you can go for LeBlanc 3 with AP items. She fits pretty nicely into this comp. You can potentially hacker her, or you could potentially hacker Gnar, although hacker Gnar is a little weird due to the way his ult works. In terms of augments for this comp, obviously you really want the Gadgeteen +1 augments. Those are going to be very good. Prankster Crest is very strong as well. You can even potentially at level 8 fit in Jinx for 4 Prankster if you have Prankster Crest, or you could fit in Jinx at level 8 for 3 Prankster anyways. Knife's Edge is going to be fantastic because you typically want to be front rowing your Gnar, so a bunch of bonus damage to him. Second Wind is great, your comp is very tanky. Throw the Hunt's great, extra burst healing onto your Gnar. When you're playing this comp and you go level 8, you could realistically just throw in any random legendary. Typically going to be something like a Fiddlesticks, something like a Leona, maybe like an Urgot as well. Should all be solid options. You could even theoretically throw in like a Syndra, as you get 2 Star Guardian with Echo, and she might be able to do some work, especially if you're running Lulu instead of Nunu at that point. Also gives you 2 hearts, so a bit of AP scaling, although your comp doesn't scale that great off of AP. So there's some decent options. Your 8th slot could really be anything in this comp. In terms of hero augments, you pretty much always want to be taking either one of the Gnar augments or one of the Nunu augments. The better of the 2 Nunu augments is actually going to be the Nunu carry augment. I don't think this comp cares very much about AP. So having the Nunu carry with 5 Gadgeteen will make him do a crazy amount of damage. If you get the Nunu carry with 5 Gadgeteen, you're pretty much just top 4 guaranteed off that, even if you don't hit Gnar 3, due to how strong even a Nunu 1 with 3 items with 5 Gadgeteen on his carry augment is. Alright, so next we have Camille Reroll. This comp is somewhat similar to how it played in set 8, although it's been changed quite a bit and buffed a lot. The idea of this comp is we want to roll on level 6 for Camille 3, and once we hit Camille 3, we can push levels. The way we want to run this comp is we want to be running Camille, and then LeBlanc for admin along with our Camille. We can run Pyke for hacker, and then fit in Jhin Vex for Riftwalker, which actually will naturally give us 3 Renegade. And then on the board I have here, I simply just put in Shen for 3 hacker, although realistically this slot isn't needed to be anything. When you're rolling at level 6, obviously you won't be able to hit a board like this, so you may want to just drop some of these units. You probably won't have Threat X, you probably won't have Jhin, so you're going to have to naturally fit in 3 Renegade, probably with something like Sylas and Lucian. And this board here could be a sample of a board you could play at level 6. In terms of items here, the most important things are of course going to be Camille items. You really want healing on your Camille. Bloodthirster is the best, but Gunblade and Hand of Justice are also acceptable. Infinity Edge is your next best item, and then Titans is your 3rd best item, but you don't have to have best in slot. Giant Slayer is solid, Rapid Fire Cannon is solid, your Double Titans is solid. Deathblade is solid if you don't have a strong scaling AD admin. Last Whisper's fine, depending on some lobbies. In terms of other items here, you could throw random tank items on a frontliner, like let's say Shen, and then random AP items could theoretically go on like a Viego. If you go back to the Riftwalker variation here, we could throw in Jhin and we could throw in Vex. And then you could actually theoretically, if you have AP items, you know, go 5 Renegade with like Viego. Or you could throw AP items on the LeBlanc as well. Or even Pyke if you go Pyke 3. Of course, with this comp, Shen is completely not necessary to run here, so you can always feel free to drop this Shen. And there's a bunch of different stuff you could run. We could go 5 Renegade from this position, so we could run Viego, and then, you know, run some random other Renegade, ideally Leona. And then we could probably slot in like Alistar here as well. This looks solid to me as well. fits in 8 units nicely, so this would be a solid level 8 board. You play 5 Renegade for Camille. Of course, if your admin is very good, you could opt to drop some of these and go with 4 admin. If you have Renegade +1, you could even drop this Alistar and play 7 Renegade if that's something you want to do. There's a lot of options because your core here is really only these 5 units of Pyke, LeBlanc, Vex, Jhin, Camille, so you could run any random frontliner here as well. If you have a lot of tank items, you could opt to go for a stronger frontliner, maybe like an Aatrox or something. It's really not going to be picky what you're running in this slots. In terms of your best augments, Adaptive Defenses is going to be the best hero augment you could take in this comp. You typically want to be playing it on a Camille augment, but Hextech Retribution is fine as well. Knife's Edge is fantastic. Camille's an AD champion and she's being hackered, so she doesn't care about being in the front 2 rows. Admin +1 is fantastic. Getting 4 admin nice and easily is very good. Not having to hit the Warwick for it will make you a lot stronger mid-game. Renegade +1 is also great, as we already talked about. And Featherweights is great as well, will buff Camille's attack speed a lot. In terms of admins in this comp, the best ones are typically going to be admins that just give attack damage to Camille. You want your Camille to just be one-shotting stuff. HP scaling admins are also strong as well, although in my opinion a bit worse. And on top of that, attack speed admins are also acceptable. Alright, so next we have Draven Reroll. This comp is going to play almost exactly the same as it did in set 8. You just want to get to level 6, stay level 6, slow rolling for Draven 3 along with your other 3 stars, so typically Gangplank 3, Malphite 3, Lucian 3, sometimes even Wukong 3, if you can hit it. You really just play those units. In terms of items here, you really want Last Whisper on Draven, you really want healing on Draven. Honestly, Bloodthirster, Hand of Justice, and Gunblade are all acceptable. And then you typically want a raw damage item as your last item. Infinity Edge is the best. Giant Slayer is acceptable. Rage Blade is also solid in that last slot. And then any spare tank items you have can go in either Malphite or Lucian, whichever one you're closer to 3-starring. And then after you get Draven items, the actual best items are going to be Zeeks, and you can just stack Zeeks in this comp to buff up your Draven, because you're really just funneling this Draven as much as possible. In terms of what we can run, this will typically be the level 6 board. At level 8, you can just try and play 5 Mech with Leona Garen to buff the Draven even more. If you have Mech +1, of course, you could fit in the 5 Mech around earlier at level 7. If you have a very good admin, you could opt to just run LeBlanc Camille for 2 admin. Good admins are going to be AD on kill is probably the best one for this comp, although healing on kill is also quite good. But yeah, AD on kill, attack speed on kill is also good, but AD on kill is very, very good. If you have AD on kill, you always want to be fitting into admin for your Draven. In addition, there's another variation in this comp where you run 4 Defender. This is one you might play if you have a lot of poppies early game. In the 4 Defender variation, you're going to drop out of supers, so you don't play supers, and you go Poppy, you 3-star her, and then you can simply play Rel. You'll probably try and 3-star her. And then a lot of times you'll play this on a +1 defender, but you'll stay level 5 and roll for Poppy 3, Wukong 3, then typically go level 6, go for Draven 3, Rel 3, and then you will also typically just run, if you don't have the Defender +1, Riven as well. This is good in a really heavy AD lobby, but I do think the Supers variation is just better. In terms of augments for this comp, both Draven augments are ideally what you want to be hitting to play this comp. You generally don't want to play this comp without them, although there are some exceptions, like sometimes on Golden Ticket you'll want to play without one. So in terms of those, you want to either take either Draven augment. League of Draven's a bit better, but Ruthless Blades is acceptable as well. Throw the Hunt's fantastic for this comp. Ascension's also really good, as the fights actually will go a decent amount and just let Draven one-shot stuff at the end. Celestial Blessing again is also good. If you have Celestial Blessing, you can actually forego healing on the Draven and run double damage. Featherweights is also great because it buffs Draven's attack speed. If you're playing this comp and you don't have 2-cost hero augment and you're forced to take a 4-cost hero augment, you typically are just going to be forced to take either Draven or Leona. Eclipse Prime is actually quite good, so Eclipse Prime is very acceptable, but you may be forced to take Garen or Leona if it's 4 or 5-cost hero augment. The nice thing about getting a Leona augment is it lets you activate the 5 mech consistently. You don't have to wait for the Leona. Alright, so next we have Fiora Reroll. The idea of this comp is to utilize Fiora's carry augment to the best of our abilities. What you're going to want to do is go level 6 and roll for Fiora 3, and then once you have Fiora 3, you can go level 7. And once you're at level 7, you can roll for other 3 stars, finishing out Yasuo 3, going for potentially Nyla 3, and Vayne 3 as well. In terms of our units here, we're just running 4 Duelist, 4 Ox Force. Theoretically run 6 Duelist over the 4 Ox Force as well, dropping Viego Alistar. 6 Duelist would be acceptable here. And at level 6, you probably just drop the Viego and run those 6 units. In terms of items here, there's a bunch of Fiora items that are solid. I think Rage Blade is quite good, especially if you're going to go the 4 Duelist variation, Rage Blade is quite good. If you're going the 6 Duelist variation, probably don't prioritize Rage Blade as much. I really like to have healing item on Fiora here, so Bloodthirster is going to be your best. Hand of Justice and Gunblade might be acceptable, but Bloodthirst is definitely the best. Warmogs is very good. It allows you to stabilize really hard early because her carry augment's going to be doing damage based off of her max HP. Titans is also a very good item in this build as well. And then Quicksilver is also fantastic for her. Then a lot of times you're going to be itemizing the Yasuo because you get him to 3-star, so AP items can go on him. If you don't have spare AP items, you can go AD items on Vayne. You won't always hit Yasuo 3, so if you're not going for Yasuo 3, don't really itemize him. You may just go for AD items for Vayne. You can also stack lockets with Nyla, but I think it's a bit worse in this variation due to the fact that you're going to have a super tanky Fiora, but locket stack in this variation is strong as well. And then you can throw any random tank items on Nyla. In terms of augments for this comp here, you really need to be playing this with the Fiora carry augment. Standard duelist augments are going to be good, so duelist +1's fantastic. Oxforce +1's fantastic. You can fit in 4 Oxforce at level 6 without having to play the Viego. If you have Oxforce +2, of course you can fit in 6 Oxforce. If you have duelist +1, you could even consider going 8 after you hit Fiora 3. After you hit Fiora 3, you should go level 8 and then play 8 duelist, 2 Oxforce in that position. Thrill the Hunt and Battle Mage are also great in this comp, and then Knife's Edge also will stabilize you pretty hard early game, which is really good. So next we have Rock Solid Malphite carry. So you really only want to be playing this comp if you have the Rock Solid augment, which is Malphite's carry augment. And the idea of this comp is to slow roll on level 6 for Malphite 3, and then whatever other 3-stars we can get, typically going to be Lee Sin, Gangplank, and maybe Nasus, and then potentially Vex 3 as well. In terms of items, Malphite's going to want healing +2 tank items. Bloodthirster is his best healing item, although Gunblade is acceptable as well. The Bramble's going to be his best tank item. Spark is also very good. But you don't have to be going Bramble Spark here. Stoneplate's also very good. Declaw is very good. Warmogs is solid as well. Even something like Redemption is probably decent too. If we have spare AP items, we can throw them on Vex. And if we have spare AD items, we can throw them on Nasus if we can get a Nasus 3. If we can't get a Nasus 3, what we can do at level 7 is drop Nasus and instead run Jhin and Pyke. And then Riftwalker near the Vex for mascot, and then of course drop the Nasus in that position. Once you hit your 3-stars, you can go level 7, go for Vex 3 potentially, and if you hit that or don't want to hit it, you can go level 8. If you don't have anything better to run, you can probably just run Echo for Aegis, as well as another Aegis, maybe like Leona. If you have mascot +1, of course you can play Nunu for 6 mascot, and if you don't have Nunu at level 8, you could again just play Jhin Pyke and Riftwalker the Vex for 6 mascot that way if you have mascot +1. In terms of augments for this comp, Rock Solid is really what you need to play this. Battle Mage is also very strong. It gives Malphite a bunch of armor, which is really good. Preparation is also solid. You're going to be rerolling, having stuff on bench. All these units love the bonus stats. Second Wind is great, makes your Malphite even tankier. Cybernetic Shell, again, is going to buff your armor, which is going to be buffing your damage you're dealing. And First Aid Kit is just fantastic in any mascot comp. You typically do want at least one chain item, typically either going to be Bramble or Stoneplate on your Malphite to ensure that he does a lot of damage, but honestly I've seen this comp work without a chain item, but that is important to keep in mind, that Malphite here is your main damage dealer, and his damage is going to be based off his armor, so getting chains is very valuable. Alright, so next we have Lucian Pantheon Reroll. Now the idea of this comp is to play around Infiniteam hexes. What you want to do is you want to hit Pantheon 3, Lucian 3, and then place these 2 units in the Infiniteam hexes. That way you essentially have 4 3-item 3-star units, which should actually give you a pretty solid board to top 4 with. You really want to be playing this if you have Infiniteam +1, due to the fact that 7 Infiniteam is a lot better than 5 Infiniteam, but this is technically playable on 5 Infiniteam if you're just hitting a lot of Lucians and Pantheons. It's also quite good with the Pantheon carry augment as well. In terms of items here, we want to be running blue buff on our Lucian plus damage item. So Death Cap is great, Jewel Gauntlet's solid, and healing is also quite good, so Gunblade is good. Giant Slayer is going to be good, Hand of Justice is going to be good, even Shiv is going to be solid as well. Archangels is also solid as well. Pantheon just wants to take our tank items, so just traditional tank items, stuff like Spark, Warmogs, Bramble, Dragon's Claw, Vow, that type of stuff, Stoneplate in the front line. When you play this comp, you're going to be rolling a bit at level 4. So typically, what I like to do is I like to roll down to 30 gold at 3-1, and then eco back up and slow roll at level 5 for my 3-stars. But if you're close to them at 3-1, you can just roll to 0, hit Lucian 3, Panth 3, and be very stable. Your board at level 4 or level 5 is typically just going to be 5 Infiniteam. So typically just Pantheon, Sivir, Lucian, and then you can run Ezreal for the quick draw, and then Shen, assuming you have the +1 Infiniteam, that's what you'd play. If you don't have the +1 Infiniteam, of course, you could drop Sivir for a defender. And then when you push levels, you just want to slot in more Infiniteams to buff up your clones as much as possible. Pantheon carry augment's very good. The Lucian support augment's good. Don't play the Lucian carry augment with this comp. You don't want to be gaining XP too quickly. If you can't get those, the Shen augments should also be strong as well. And the Twisted Fate support augment is also acceptable. In terms of regular augments, Infiniteam +1 is going to be the best thing you can get for this comp. Featherweights, of course, is great when you're running Lucian and Pantheon as your carries. Alright, so next we have Lucian Renegade Reroll. What you're typically going to want to be doing in this comp is rolling down to 30 at 3-1 and then slow rolling 50 for Lucian 3 and then potentially Sylas 3 as well. There's a few variations of what you can play in this comp, but we're really going to prioritize Lucian and Sylas 3. You can run the supers as well and go for those 3 stars if you wish, and you can also go for Camille 3 here. That being said, you can also opt to drop the supers and play 5 Renegades, so the 5 Renegade variation is right here. In this variation, you simply just play Lucian, Camille, Sylas, Jhin, Vex, Pyke, and then +1. LeBlanc is the most natural fit because she gives Hacker to your Camille and gives admin as well, especially if you have a strong admin. So this comp here is really good about playing around Lucian, Sylas, and this one is great if you want to fit in Camille as well. In terms of items for this comp, we want to be putting AP items on Lucian. Blue buff is his best item. Deathcap's very strong, Gunblade's very strong, Giant Slayer is very strong, Hand of Justice is very strong as well, Archangel should be solid, Jewel Gauntlet should be solid. Sylas here wants to go our tank items. Best in slot Sylas is going to be Warmogs plus Stoneplate, but realistically we can run anything such as Dragon's Claw, Ionic Spark for our Lucian. If you have Kingslayer, you definitely want to make sure you're itemizing your Sylas first though, but if you don't have Kingslayer, his items don't matter as much, and honestly, you could even itemize like Malphite or Lee Sin instead if you hit them. Again, if we have 80 items, we can put them on Camille because getting Camille 3 is very reasonable. So for this comp, what you're either going to want to do is you're going to want to, after you hit your Sylas 3, Lucian 3 on level 5, go level 6. You can either then roll for Camille 3, Lee Sin 3, Malphite 3, or you could push levels and play a variation similar to what I have right here. The Camille variation is going to be very strong if you have AD items, so definitely consider putting in Hacker on your Camille if you have AD items. Comp right here, of course, once you hit your stuff at level 6, you'll typically just go level 8, and then you can slot in 5 Renegade just by running, Jhin, Viego, or whatnot for 5 Renegade is probably your best option. In terms of augments here, Kingslayer is probably the best. Kingslayer is fantastic on Sylas. Renegade +1 is great. It allows you to fit in 5 Renegade really easily at level 7 or even level 6 if you just drop one of these supers. And then if you play this variation, it's quite easy to then slot in 7 Renegade as well, potentially. Jewel Lotus is great as you have multiple good damage dealers. Featherweights is fantastic because you're running a lot of low-cost units. In terms of hero augments, if you're 1-cost, Kingslayer is probably the best for this comp. Again, don't go the Lucian carry augment, you don't want to be gaining too much XP. Hextech Retribution is great for this comp as well. Honestly, if you have Camille items, you can play adaptive defenses, but honestly at that point you're more so playing Camille Reroll than this comp. In terms of 4 or 5-cost hero augments, 5-cost you probably just want Eclipse Prime from Leona, and 4-cost you probably just want the Viego support augment, and then you just play 5 Renegade if you're given 4-5 hero augment. Alright, so next we have Lux Reroll. Now when you're playing this comp, you really want to be playing with Illuminating Singularity, which is Lux's carry augment. I would not recommend playing this without that comp. The idea of this comp is really just to put in as many Star Guardians as possible for Lux, and just have her do as much damage as possible and buy as much time for her. In terms of items here, you're really going to want Shojin on Lux +2. I think Gunblade is the next best item. And then third item can be an assortment of items. Deathcap is good, Giant Slayer is good, Jewel Gauntlet is good, Guardbreaker is good. And then you want to go tank items. Spark is going to be the best one you can get, but generic tank items like Warmogs, Brambles, Stoneplate, Dragon's Claw, and that are good as well. When you play this comp, you're going to want to roll down usually to about 30 gold at 3-1, and then reevaluate. A lot of times you'll slow roll 50 for a few rounds, and sometimes you'll just send it to 0 if you're at like 8 Luxes. At level 5, what I'd recommend playing is Lux plus Annie plus 2 more Star Guardians, so typically like Nyla Rel. To activate 4 Star Guardian plus Spellslinger, and then obviously like Kai'Sa as your 4th Star Guardian at that level. And then you can slot in Alistar at like level 6. And then once you go level 8, you can pivot into 6 Star Guardian with this board shown here. If you can get to Cinder, Shojin is fantastic on her as she will just throw in units with 6 Star Guardian. If you don't hit Nyla plus Kai'Sa, there's a variation of the level 4-5 board that you can play right here, which looks like this: Lux, Annie, Rel, Poppy, Alistar. This should be a decent board at level 5, although a bit worse than 4 Star Guardian, but that does require hitting Nyla and Kai'Sa. In terms of augments here, you need Illuminating Singularity to play the comp. Cybernetic Uplink is good, we just want Lux to cast as much as possible. Mana Zane is very good from Portable Forge as well. Again, we want her to cast as much as possible.
Axiom Arc is great. Again, we want to cast as much as possible. And Jeweled Lotus is just a bunch of free damage for your Lux, so that augment is very good as well. Star Guardian +1 is solid. You can try and fit in 8 Star Guardian. It's a little hard. I mean, you could drop Alistar here for 8 Star Guardian at level 8, or you could get level 9 and slot in 8 Star Guardian. Spellslinger +1 is okay. I don't think it's amazing, but with this board here, it would obviously allow you to potentially put a Spellslinger splat on Echo and play 4 Spellslinger, but honestly, you're not really lacking damage. You just want frontline and more casts. Alright, so next we have Lulu Poppy Reroll. The idea of this comp is to play around Lulu plus Poppy dual carry with your damage items on Lulu and your tank items on Poppy. This comp is best to play on either the Poppy carry augment or the Lulu carry augment, but it technically doesn't have to have one of those to play the comp. The idea of this comp is you're going to roll down to usually about 30 gold at 3-1 and then slow roll level 5 for Poppy 3, Lulu 3, and then oftentimes Wukong 3 as well. Lulu items, you really want Blue Buff +2, Gunblade's going to be your next best, and then you want some AP item, typically like Giant Slayer, Jewel Gauntlet, Death Cap, Guardbreaker, those like. And then you want tank items on Poppy, Spark is going to be very good on her. Bramble and Stoneplate are fantastic because it buffs her damage. Dragon's Claw is great because she's a defender, so it makes her very tanky. You can realistically go like any tank items on her, even like Warmogs should be acceptable as well. Once you hit this board, you can go level 8 and play around 5 Gadgeteen. So we can slot in Alistar, Gnar, and Nunu at level 8 to then fit in 5 Gadgeteen to really buff up the Lulu and Poppy. One other variation of this comp is if you hit a Gadgeteen spat, what you can opt to do is reroll for Wukong 3 and run Gadgeteen Mech Wukong. So good mech items would be like Redemption, Dragon's Claw, Bramble Vest, Stoneplate. And run a comp that looks like this, playing around the Wukong as your tank instead of the Poppy as your tank, because he'll be very, very tanky with the 5 Gadgeteen. In terms of augments for this comp, the best augments are going to be the Lulu and Poppy carry augments, which are going to be Growth Spurt and Bigger, Better Buckler. Gadgeteen +1 is fantastic as well, allows you to reliably hit 5 Gadgeteen at level 7 without having to hit Nunu, which is very, very good. Axiom Arc is great, especially if you have a lot of items on Lulu, she can just chain cast away. Cybernetic Uplink is good for more casts as well. Second Wind is great because your comp is tanky, and First Aid Kit is great because Poppy and Annie are both going to be generating a lot of shields. Sona will be doing healing, and Lulu will be doing healing if you have a Gunblade as well. And I forgot to mention, but Sona, of course, slots in very naturally into this comp due to the fact that it slots out with Heart and Spellslinger, which will buff up our Annie and our Lulu a lot. Alright, so next we have Kayle Reroll. Now you really only want to play this comp if you have Kayle's carry augment, so only play it if you have that. And the idea of this comp is we're going to roll to about 30 gold on 3-1, and then go level 5 and hit Kayle 3, and then start pushing levels. Typically, Kayle is the only 3-star that really matters, although we can hit other 3-stars if we want to. In terms of items for this comp, Kayle really wants Last Whisper +2, so Deathblade, Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge are all good. Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Bloodthirster are also acceptable as well. In terms of frontline items, Locket Stack is very good because it's duelists. If you opt to go for other 3-stars, you could go for more traditional tank items though, on either Fiora or Malphite or Lucian. So the two variations here, of course, we can push levels for 6 duelist. This is going to be very good if we have a duelist +1, because then we could simply just drop these supers and play Oxforce plus another duelist at level 8 and slot in 8 duelist, which is very strong. Another way we can play this comp is we can just stay level 6 and go for 3 stars on everything, potentially put AP items on Yasuo, again tank items on either Lucian, Malphite, or Fiora. Of course, you can always drop the Lucian, Malphite at level 8 if you end up not 3-starring anything besides Kayle. That is totally acceptable. At level 4 when you play this comp, you typically want to just be playing 4 duelists, so probably just run Kayle plus what other duelists you can find, and then you can push levels, and at level 6 play 4 duelists, a 3 super, once you hit the Kayle 3. In terms of augments, you really need to find Ascent, which is Kayle's carry augment. Other strong augments are Thrill the Hunt, Celestial Blessing, because you typically want to go triple damage item on Kayle. Those allow you to forego a healing item on her and still have her not just get one-shot. Makeshift Armor is also quite good, will make your front line a lot tankier. So next we have Stacks on Stacks Nasus. You really only want to be playing this comp if you have Nasus's carry augment, which is Stacks on Stacks, so only play it if you have that. The idea of the comp is we want to roll down to about 30 gold on 3-1, and then slow roll level 5 for Nasus 3. And once we hit that, we can go level 6 to play our proper board, going for Nasus 3, Malphite 3, Lucian 3, Gangplank 3, and then potentially Alistar 3 and Vex 3 if we can hit them. What we really want here on Nasus is Last Whisper plus healing. Bloodthirst is going to be the best, but Hand of Justice and Gunblade are acceptable as well, +1. I think Titans is very good. Infinity Edge is also very good, and Giant Slayer is good as well. You typically don't want to go Deathblade because he's going to be stacking raw AD with his carry augment. Tank items will typically go on Malphite, as he's pretty easy to 3-star, and has the 4 mascot, which should make him very tanky. You can throw realistically whatever tank items you want on him.
A random AP item can go on either Gangplank or Vex. If you have an early Gangplank 3, you could throw random AP items on him. But AP items will scale better on Vex, as you can go for a Vex 3 in that position. Once you hit this board and these 3 stars, you can of course push levels. If you're just pushing levels normally, you may throw in like an Echo for Aegis, and then maybe like a Leona for Aegis as well. If you have Mascot +1, at level 8, you can slot in Jhin plus Pike, and then give the Riftwalker to your Vex, and it'll give you 6 Mascot. Again, if you also have Mascot +1, you can simply just slot in Nunu as well for 6 Mascot, which is quite strong. In terms of strong augments for this comp, Stacks and Stacks is necessary to play. Throw the Hunt is great as it's free healing for your Nasus. Scope Weapons is strong. I wouldn't go Rapid Fire Cannon on Nasus. I think it's a waste. You really want 3 proper items on him, but Scope Weapons is good. First Aid Kit is good. Again, this is Mascots, so more healing. A Second Wind is great in tanky comps like this, and Featherweights will be great to buff your Nasus' attack speed. Alright, so next we have Cyclone Wukong. You really only want to play this comp if you have Wukong's carry augment, which is Cyclone. Again, to play this comp, you're typically going to want to go roll to about 30 gold on 3-1, that's lower level 5 for your 3 stars. And then after you hit Wukong 3, start pushing levels. Wukong items here, you really want healing +2 damage items. Bloodthirst is going to be his best healing item, although Gunblade and Hand of Justice are acceptable as well. And then you typically want 2 damage items. Spark is going to be the best one. Jewel Gauntlet will be good as well. Giant Slayer is fine as well. Deathcap is fine as well. Archangels is fine as well. Titans is also fine. Tank items will typically go on Poppy, as a lot of times you can 3-star Poppy. This variation here, at level 5, you would just play Wukong plus Draven plus Jax plus Poppy plus 1 other random unit. And then once you hit the Wukong 3 Poppy 3, you can go level 7 and fit in these supers. Another variation here is just to simply hit Wukong 3 and not 3-star any of these other guys, and just run really whatever you want with it. So dropping out of these, just playing 3 mech. You can go to level 8, put in 5 mech with Leona and Garen. You could run like a Samira carry. You could really run anything as backline. Typically like a Samira or Fortune carry would make the most sense from here. So you're not forced to 3-star the other ones. You can always just hit the Wukong 3, then push levels. You can even just play random legendaries like Urgot and Fiddlesticks if you want to. In terms of augments for this comp, again, you need Cyclone to play the comp. Second Wind is great in any mech composition. Battle Mage is going to be great because you're frontlining your Wukong, gives him more armor and more EP to do more damage. Thrill the Hunt's great to give him extra burst healing. Mech Crest is also fantastic, allows you to fit in 5 mech quite easily without having to hit Leona. So you can simply just run Garen, Draven, Jax, Wukong, and get 5 mech that way. Jewel Lotus should also be good if you're not going with Jewel Gauntlet. Effectively give it to you for free, so you can go some other item in that last slot. Alright, so next we have Ashe Reroll. Now, this comp, the idea is you want to be playing around the Ashe carry augment, so you're going to be going for Ashe 3 and Renekton 3 in this comp. You typically want to roll down to about 30 gold at 3-1, then slow roll at level 5. Since Ashe is going to be Last Whisper +2, you typically want to go triple damage on her. Good +2s are going to be Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Runon's Hurricane, and Hand of Justice. You typically don't want to go Infinity Edge on Ashe, as due to my understanding her ult can already crit, so it's a lot of lost value. Renekton can take whatever tank items you have in this comp. At level 4, you'll typically, level 5, you'll typically just play Ashe plus Renekton plus Blitzcrank +2, so you could easily just slot in Yasuo for 3 Lasercorp, and then some other random unit like a Lee Sin for Brawler. At level 6, level 7, you can then push for Malphite Gangplank for the 3 supers, and potentially 3-star the Lee Sin, Malphite Gangplank, Blitzcrank as well. And then once you go 8, you can, of course, put in this Warwick for 4 Brawler. And this comp fits pretty nicely, gives you 4 Lasercorp and 3 supers. Theoretically, you can drop the supers here. You could drop Gangplank Malphite for, let's say, Mordekaiser if you hit him to get in 5 Lasercorp, and then some other random, high-cost unit, maybe like a Fiddlesticks or something. But you can also just stay lower level and try and 3-star everything at level 6, level 7 with a board like this. In terms of augments for this comp, you really want Laser Focus, which is going to be the Ashe carry augment. Lasercorp +1 is great. It allows you on level 8 to easily fit in 5 Lasercorp without the +1. Featherweights is great. It's going to buff up your Renekton and Ashe a solid amount. And Thrill the Hunt and Celestial Blessing will be good for your Ashe as well, due to the fact that you typically don't want to run a healing augment on her. A couple other notes here. Of course, you don't have to go for the Lee Sin 3, Malphite 3, Gangplank 3. You can simply just push levels and drop these later. If you really only have the Renekton 3, Ashe 3, I would highly recommend dropping the Malphite Gangplank once you get to like Mordekaiser for 5 Lasercorp plus some other legendary. But of course, you can go for them 3-starred. And if you just hit Ashe 3 very quickly before Renekton 3, you can opt to simply just fast 8, not go for the Renekton 3, and just not play the supers at all. No Gangplank, no Malphite. Again, just run like Mordekaiser and legendaries. And whatever good units you can play, whatever frontline. You just want in a frontline, you can run the Aegis with Echo Leona. You can run Vi instead of Lee Sin for Aegis as well to fit in with that. And then, run like Urgot, Fiddlesticks for extra utility. So if you just hit your Ashe 3 quickly, that's another option. You could even play that option in this version as well, even if you hit the Renekton 3, just drop out of Malphite Gangplank and play the units I just said.
That should be a strong variation too. Alright, so next we have Reign of Anger Renekton Reroll. The idea of this comp is you want to be playing it on Reign of Anger, which is Renekton's carry augment, and then you really just want to slot in as many brawlers as possible. Again, roll to about 30 gold on 3-1, and then slow roll 5 for Renekton 3. In terms of Renekton items, he has a decent amount of solid items here. You typically want healing on him, so like Bloodthirster, Gunblade, or Hand of Justice, +2. Titans is great, Rageblade's great, Quicksilver is great, Giant Slayer and RFC are solid options as well. Warmogs is also quite good on Renekton. It's a lot better on like Renekton 2 than Renekton 3. The value on Renekton 3 is diminished, but it's going to be a solid stabilization tool if you have a Warmogs mid-game. Tank items I would traditionally put on Riven, that's just going to be your best option, but maybe you put them on Lee Sin or Blitzcrank if you hit, quick Lee Sin 3, Blitzcrank 3. Typically at any point in the game, you want to be just playing as many brawlers as possible. So at level 4, level 5, you should be playing 4 brawlers. Then at level 6, you should be opting for 6 brawlers as soon as you can. Obviously, this is only 6 units here, so you have a few options for the next units you could run. You can easily just opt to play Aegis here, along with Vi, so you could run like Echo Leona. You could just run random legendaries like Urgot and Fiddlesticks once you go 8. You could even run like Aurelion Soul, should be solid support for this comp and a good backline damage dealer for any AP items you have. Of course, spare AD items can just go on Warwick. You could also theoretically dual carry a Jax if you have a bunch of bows, but typically your first bows should be going on Renekton, so the likelihood of that is quite low. In terms of augments for this comp, you really want Reign of Anger. Second Wind is also fantastic for this comp, just brawlers love Second Wind. Makeshift Armor, again, brawlers love that. Battle Mage is great, you want to be front-running your Renekton, and he's going to buff him up a bunch, give him free armor, give your whole frontline free armor. Really good. Brawler +1 is fantastic as well. If you have Brawler +1, of course you just want to go for 8 Brawler every time, because Renekton's damage is going to be scaling off of his HP he has, so the more Brawlers you have, the better. Alright, so next we have Flaming Ricochet Gangplank Reroll. You really need to be playing this with Gangplank Carry Augment, which is going to be Flaming Ricochet. The idea of this comp is you want to roll down a bit at 3-1 at level 4, and then go 5 and hit Gangplank 3. At that point, you can then opt to 3-star your other units or start pushing levels. Typically, I think 3-starring your other units is a bit better. In terms of Gangplank items, you really are going to want healing +2. Best healing items are going to be either Gunblade or Hand of Justice, although Bloodthirster is fine as well. In terms of +2, Titans is the best, although Deathcap, Jewel Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, and Guardbreaker are good as well. Spark is also very, very good. It's definitely best in slot in this comp, but a lot of times you may just read the Spark on a different unit like the Nyla instead of the Gangplank. In terms of tank items, you can really put them on Lee Sin, Nyla, Rell, or Malphite. A lot of times Nyla might be the most consistent, but if you can get an early 3-star of Rell, Malphite, or Lee Sin, it's going to be solid as well. You're not forced to play the Rell and the Riven here, because obviously this variation runs Gangplank, Nyla, Rell, Malphite, Riven, Lee Sin. Fit in 3 Super, 2 Brawler, 2 Defender, 2 Duelist, 2 Star Guardian, but the 2 Star Guardian and the 2 Defender might not be the most important, especially 2 Defender if you're not in an AD heavy lobby. So you may instead opt to play a 4 Duelist variation to buff up your Gangplank more. This variation is very good if you have Duelist +1 as well, because you can go level 7, play 6 Duelist, and start getting that Duelist damage reduction, which is very powerful. You could even opt to go 8 Duelist if you hit it and drop out a Malphite Lee Sin. It's a little weird because Gangplank doesn't scale very well off of Duelist traditionally, but the damage reduction is just really good for this comp. You pretty much always want Gangplank next to your Nyla in this comp, so that way she can heal him up. And then she's a great holder of spread items because it makes the positioning very easy, but sometimes you may want to be putting your tank items on your Nyla instead, because if you just have a bunch of 2-stars, 2-star Nyla tank items is going to be better than anything else with tank items, and so you may have to put your spread items on, like, let's say a Lee Sin or a Yasuo or whatnot if you're putting tank items on the Nyla. In terms of augments for this comp, you really need Flaming Ricochet to play the comp. Featherweights is also good. It's good in this variation right here because we're only running 2 Duelists. If you're going to be running vertical duels like 4, 6, 8, Featherweights is typically not that good because stacking attack speed doesn't do that much. Jewel Lotus is great, just a free Jewel Gauntlet for your Gangplank. Axiomark's fantastic as he is 50 mana, so a lot of times he'll just chain cast with it. Battle Mage is great, you want to be frontlining your whole comp anyways. Everything's going to be scaling well off of AP. Gangplank and Nyla will scale really heavily off of AP. If you're running the Duelist variation, Yasuo also scales well off of AP, and then of course everything's going to scale off of the armor. Preparation is also just very good. The units use the stats very well because they're going to like the tank stats, and the AD stats are decent, the AP stats are decent, so preparation is just good in a reroll comp like this as well.
So if you've made it to the end, I want to thank you for watching. Again, if you're interested in meta updates and the tier list I'll be making, telling you how to play each patch and what comps are the best for each patch, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to have a bunch of more interesting guides on the way in addition to those. I'm planning on doing a bunch of content in set 8.5, so feel free to follow for that. In addition, I want to have a huge shout out to my friend MeinTGL for basically being up the past 24 hours with me working on this. We've been crunching to try and get this together for release day for set 8.5. Quite a bit of work making this entire presentation and then recording all the pieces, editing everything together and making sure it's cohesive. So I want to thank him a bunch for helping me out with that entire thing. And thank you for watching.